let's dive into a topic that's both spooky and fascinating, the curse of the mummy. We're basing this deep dive mainly on a National Geographic article, same name.
Yeah, the curse of the mummy.
You know, the classic idea, you open an ancient tomb and
Yeah.
bam, bad stuff happens. But how much truth is there really to these ancient curses? That's what we're going to explore.
It's amazing how that idea,
Hmm.
that curse, it's so ingrained in our minds. You say mummy's curse,
Yeah.
everyone pictures King Tut's golden mask. Right?
Okay. Yeah, it's true. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb back in 1922, that really seemed to cement the idea, especially with Lord Carnarvon dying. He
Right.
was the one who financed the whole expedition. And he died so soon after they opened the tomb, newspapers had a field day.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But, it's important to remember Carnarvon, his death wasn't because of some pharaoh's revenge. It was an infected mosquito bite.
Oh.
And if you really look at the numbers, the deaths among the excavation team, it doesn't really point to this big, powerful curse. Out of the 26 people that were there at the tomb opening, only 6 of them died within 10 years.
Which makes me think, Howard Carter, the main archaeologist, he was right there in the tomb leading the whole thing. And he lived for almost 20 years after they opened it. If there was a real curse, wouldn't you think? He'd be the first one to go.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? So, if King Tut's tomb isn't the root of this belief, where does this whole curse idea come from? This is where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Well, an Egyptologist, Dominic Montserrat, he did some research and traced this curse idea back to, get this, a 19th century London stage show. Imagine, mummies being unwrapped live on stage, like a form of entertainment.
Wait, seriously, a live mummy unwrapping is kind of creepy, but I can see how that would be interesting to watch.
Apparently it was a hit. It seems like our obsession with mummies, this idea that they might, come back and get us, it's been around for a while. Montserrat thinks that this stage show, with all the drama and the mystery, that's what inspired writers to start creating these stories about mummies getting revenge. And those stories, they captured the public's imagination.
So basically, the curse, it was born from showmanship, not
Yeah.
some ancient Egyptian inscription.
Seems that way. It really shows you the power of a good story, right?
Right.
It can shape how we see things, even something like archaeology, which seems so factual.
So did this Montserrat, did he find any early examples of these mummy stories, these revenge tales?
He did, actually. There's even a book by Louisa May Alcott, the one who wrote Little Women.
Oh, wow.
She wrote a lesser-known book. It's called Lost in a Pyramid, or The Mummy's Curse. And remember, this is all before Tutankhamun, so it seems like this whole curse idea was already a thing in popular culture, before any big archaeological discoveries.
So even before King Tut's tomb, people were writing and performing about the mummy's curse. It was like ready to explode into the public consciousness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But before we completely dismiss the ancient Egyptians' role in all this, we should think about their beliefs about death and burial. They're a pretty complex culture.
That's true. Those elaborate tombs, all their rituals around death. Did they have any beliefs or practices that could have led to this curse idea, even if it wasn't, supernatural?
Well, there's another Egyptologist, Salima Ikram. She has a different perspective. She thinks the ancient Egyptians did have something like a curse, but not in the way we typically think of it. More like an early security system.
A security system? What do you mean by that?
Well, she points to these inscriptions that were found in some early tombs, these structures called mastabas.
Mastabas.
So, mastabas, they're a type of ancient Egyptian tomb, usually rectangular, kind of like precursors to the pyramids. And these mastabas, they sometimes had inscriptions on the walls, but they weren't exactly, rest in peace kind of messages, more like warnings to anyone who might want to rob the grave, threats of divine retribution.
So less rest in peace, more like mess with me and you'll face the wrath of the gods.
Exactly. And they got pretty specific with the consequences, too. Attacks by crocodiles, lions, scorpions, snakes, you name it. It's easy to see how someone could look at those warnings, especially today, and interpret them as a curse.
Yeah, that makes sense. Even if you didn't believe in the gods, I bet those warnings would make you think twice before you looted a tomb.
Right. It's a clever mix of practical security and appealing to people's spiritual side, or at least their fear of the unknown.
So we've got these ancient warnings, like security measures,
Yeah.
and then these theatrical stage shows, and then the King Tut frenzy. That really locked the idea in people's minds. But what about the mummies themselves? Is there any science behind this curse? Could there be, like, deadly bacteria or toxins lurking in those tombs?
That's a question that's really intrigued scientists. Imagine Tombs sealed for thousands of years, filled with who knows what kind of pathogens. Kind of sounds like a horror movie, doesn't it?
Totally. It's like something straight out of a movie. I've heard those theories too,
Yeah.
about toxic mold and ancient viruses, like all these creepy crawlies just waiting to be released. Pretty scary thought.
Yeah, there have been studies, and they have found mold and bacteria on some mummies. And some of these, yeah, they could cause problems, like breathing issues, especially for people with weaker immune systems.
So there is a risk then. Maybe the curse is just a bunch of ancient germs.
Well, hold on a second. While those microorganisms are there, most scientists think the actual risk is pretty low.
Really? Why is that? I'd think a sealed tomb would be perfect for, growing all sorts of nasty stuff.
Well, think about it. These tombs have been closed up for thousands of years. So whatever's living inside, it hasn't had a chance to, spread or adapt. It's probably pretty fragile.
I guess that makes sense. Plus, archaeologists today, they wear masks and protective gear, right? When they're excavating.
Exactly. And even back in Carter's time, think about Egypt back then. The streets of Cairo, probably full of all kinds of microbes, probably more dangerous than anything in a sealed tomb.
So no archaeologists keeling over after opening tombs?
Nope, not at all. There's one scientist, F. DeWolf Miller. He even said that Lord Carnarvon, he was probably safer inside Tut's tomb than out and about in Egypt at the time.
Wow, that's a pretty strong statement. But wouldn't the tomb itself, wouldn't it still be risky?
Well, there's always a chance, sure. But the evidence seems to suggest that the so-called curse, it was probably more from a mosquito bite than from the mummy.
So it sounds like science really doesn't back up the idea of, deadly tomb toxins wiping out archaeologists or tourists.
Exactly, more myth than reality.
Okay, so let's go over what we've talked about. We've got the ancient warnings, like security systems. We've got those stage shows playing on people's fears, and the whole media frenzy around King Tut. And then the mummies themselves. Maybe some microbes, but not exactly a deadly threat. So where does that leave us?
I think it reminds us, sometimes a good story, it just sticks around. Longer than the facts.
That's true. The mummy's curse, it's such a captivating idea. It plays on our fears, The unknown, ancient powers, things that go bump in the night.
Right, it's like a classic campfire story.
Yeah, one that just won't die.
And it connects to our fascination with ancient Egypt. It's a civilization full of mystery and grandeur. We're just drawn to these stories, even if deep down we know they might not be true.
So are we saying the mummy's curse is completely made up?
Well, the evidence strongly suggests it's more fiction than fact. It's a product of entertainment, ancient security, and maybe most importantly, our own psychology.
Right, our fear of the unknown. And a good dose of storytelling. That's what keeps this myth alive.
It's like a cultural echo, It keeps coming back to us.
It makes me wonder what other ancient myths or legends might have, equally surprising origins, what seems supernatural, but might actually have a perfectly normal explanation.
That's a great question. It reminds us to always be curious, to question what we think we know, and to keep exploring, that intersection of history, culture, and the human mind.
I like that. So the next time I hear a spooky story, I'll remember there might be a more interesting story underneath, a more human story.
Exactly. Always question, always explore, and never underestimate the power of a good yarn. Who knows what other myths are out there, just waiting to be uncovered.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the curse of the mummy. Thanks for joining us as we unwrapped this age-old myth.
It's been a pleasure diving into this topic.
And remember, the next time you come across a spooky story or something that seems impossible, don't be afraid to dig a little deeper. You never know what interesting truths you might find.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and stay curious.
See you on our next deep dive.
Yeah, it's like that little part of you just can't help but wonder what if, even when you know it's not real.
It's amazing, isn't it? And you think about it, we're still talking about this curse today, centuries after those first stage shows. It shows you how ingrained it is in our culture.
It's like a meme, almost, this cultural meme that keeps getting passed down. We just can't let go of it.
And maybe that's the real curse, the way a good story can capture our imagination and stay with us even after we know the truth.
It makes you wonder, what other myths and legends might have these, unexpected beginnings, things that seem supernatural, but actually have a totally normal explanation?
That's a great point. It's a reminder to always be curious, question everything, and keep exploring that connection between history, culture, and our own minds.
I like that. So wrapping up our deep dive into the curse of the mummy.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today. We had fun unraveling this myth with you.
It was great to explore this topic. And remember, the next time you hear a spooky story or something that seems unbelievable, don't be afraid to dig a little deeper. You might find some fascinating truths hiding there.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and stay curious.
We'll see you on our next deep dive.